If you're ready to dive into the darkest corners of justice gone wrong, smash that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about the truth. Hit like if you love twisted crime stories, and drop a comment telling me if you think you could spot the real killer before the end. Now, let's get into it. The call came in at 2:47 a.m. on a freezing November night in 2003. A jogger had stumbled upon something in Riverside Park that would haunt the small town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, for the next 15 years. Lying face down in the mud, partially hidden beneath a canopy of fallen oak leaves, was the body of 23-year-old Emma Walsh. Her auburn hair was matted with blood. Her blue winter coat was torn at the shoulder, and her eyes, still open, stared blankly at the night sky above. Detective Sarah Mendez was the first senior investigator on the scene. She had been with the Millbrook Police Department for 8 years, but nothing had prepared her for the sight that awaited her in that park. The crime scene tape fluttered in the cold wind as forensic techs moved carefully around the body, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like searching ghosts. Emma's purse was missing. Her phone was gone. But around her neck, barely visible beneath her collar, were deep purple bruises, the unmistakable marks of strangulation. Emma Walsh had been a graduate student at Millbrook University, studying environmental science. She was known for her bright smile, her dedication to her research, and her habit of jogging through Riverside Park every evening, rain or shine. Her roommate, Jessica Torres, had reported her missing when Emma failed to return home by midnight. Jessica had tried calling her dozens of times, each call going straight to voicemail, each ring amplifying the growing knot of fear in her stomach. Now, as dawn broke over the park, that fear had become a terrible reality. The investigation moved quickly. Detective Mendez and her team canvassed the area, interviewed witnesses, and collected evidence. A security camera from a nearby gas station had captured grainy footage of Emma jogging past at 7:15 p.m. She was alone, earbuds in, completely unaware that she had less than an hour to live. The medical examiner determined that Emma had died between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m., strangled manually by someone with considerable strength. Within 48 hours, the police had their suspect. Marcus Daniel Reed was a 26-year-old maintenance worker at Millbrook University. He had no prior criminal record, no history of violence, and by all accounts, he was a quiet, hard-working man who kept to himself. But there was one detail that made him the focus of the investigation. Marcus had been seen near Riverside Park on the night of Emma's murder. A witness, an elderly man walking his dog, reported seeing Marcus standing at the edge of the park around 7:45 p.m., looking anxious and breathing heavily. When Detective Mendez brought Marcus in for questioning, his story seemed inconsistent. He claimed he had been jogging in the park that evening, his usual route, and had left around 8 p.m. to head home. But he couldn't provide anyone who had seen him leave. He lived alone. He had no alibi. And when forensic teams searched a small apartment on the outskirts of town, they found something that made Sarah's blood run cold. In Marcus's laundry hamper, buried beneath a pile of work clothes, was a navy blue hoodie. There were faint brownish stains on the left sleeve, stains that turned out to be blood. Emma's blood. The arrest was swift. Marcus Daniel Reed was charged with first-degree murder. The trial that followed was a media sensation. The prosecution painted Marcus as a loner who had become obsessed with Emma, a bright young woman who had caught his eye on campus. They argued that he had followed her into the park that night, attacked her when she rejected his advances, and then fled the scene. The blood on his hoodie was damning evidence. The timeline fit, and Marcus's own stammering testimony on the stand, where he insisted he didn't know how Emma's blood had gotten on his clothing, only made him seem more guilty. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. Marcus Daniel Reed was found guilty of murder in the first degree. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the bailiff led him away in handcuffs, Marcus turned back toward the courtroom, his eyes finding Detective Mendez in the crowd. There was no anger in his gaze, only a hollow, broken sadness. He mouthed 2 words, "I'm innocent." Sarah Mendez watched him go, and for just a moment, a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. But she pushed it aside. The evidence was clear. Justice had been served. Emma Walsh's family could finally begin to heal. Or so everyone thought. 15 years passed. Marcus Reed became just another name in the Pennsylvania state prison system, another face behind bars, another life that had been permanently altered by one terrible night. He filed appeal after appeal, each one denied. He wrote letters to Innocence Projects, to journalists, to anyone who might listen. But the evidence against him had been too strong. The case was closed. The town of Millbrook moved on. Until the spring of 2018, when a small nonprofit organization called the Keystone Innocence Project took on Marcus's case. They had been reviewing old convictions, looking for cases where new DNA technology might shed light on unsolved questions. Marcus's case caught their attention because of one overlooked detail. The blood on his hoodie had been tested using the DNA technology available in 2003, which had confirmed it was Emma's. But the more advanced testing available 15 years later could do something the old tests couldn't. It could isolate and identify secondary DNA, trace amounts left by someone else who might have touched the fabric. The Keystone team petitioned the court for a new round of testing. After months of legal battles, they were granted permission. The hoodie was sent to a state-of-the-art forensic lab in Philadelphia. And when the results came back 3 months later, they sent shockwaves through everyone involved in the original case. The secondary DNA on the hoodie didn't belong to Marcus Reed. It didn't belong to Emma Walsh. It belonged to someone else entirely. Someone whose DNA was already in the criminal database. Someone who should never have been anywhere near that piece of evidence. Detective Sarah Mendez, now a lieutenant and still with the Millbrook Police Department, sat in her office staring at the lab report, her hands trembling. The name on the page was impossible. It couldn't be right. But the science didn't lie. The DNA match was 99.7% certain. She reached for her phone, her mind racing through the implications of what she was reading. If this DNA evidence was real, it meant they had sent an innocent man to prison for 15 years. It meant the real killer had been walking free all this time. And it meant that someone she had trusted, someone who had been part of the investigation from the very beginning, had been hiding a terrible secret. But when she looked closer at the name, when she cross-referenced it with the case files from 2003, a cold realization settled over her like a heavy stone. This wasn't just any DNA match. This was someone who had access to the evidence. Someone who had been in the room when they processed Marcus's clothing. Someone who had every opportunity to plant that blood, to frame an innocent man, to make sure the investigation never looked in the right direction. The DNA belonged to Officer Daniel Kruger, a patrol officer who had been first on the scene at Riverside Park the night Emma Walsh's body was discovered. The same officer who had been standing right beside Detective Mendez when they arrested Marcus Reed. The same officer who had testified at the trial, his testimony helping to seal Marcus's fate. Sarah's mind flashed back to that night 15 years ago, to the crime scene, to the moments after they found Emma's body. She remembered Kruger had been the one who found the witness who claimed to have seen Marcus near the park. Kruger had been the one who suggested they search Marcus's apartment. And Kruger had been in the evidence room the day before the blood results came back. She stood up from her desk, the report still clutched in her hand, and walked to the window overlooking the Millbrook town square. Out there, somewhere in this quiet town, Daniel Kruger was living his life. He had retired from the force 3 years ago, moved to a house on the edge of town, and by all appearances, he was just another veteran cop enjoying his golden years. But Sarah knew better now. She knew that beneath that calm exterior was something dark, something twisted. And she knew that if this DNA evidence was correct, she was about to reopen the most explosive case in Millbrook's history. She picked up her phone and dialed the district attorney's office. When the receptionist answered, Sarah's voice was steady, cold, and determined. "This is Lieutenant Mendez. I need to speak to the DA immediately. We have a problem with the Emma Walsh case. A big problem." As she waited for the call to connect, Sarah looked down at the report one more time, her eyes scanning the name that had turned everything upside down. Daniel Kruger. A man she had worked alongside for years. A man she had trusted. A man who might have committed the perfect crime and let an innocent person take the fall. But when they opened Daniel Kruger's personnel file to begin building their case, when they started to dig into his background and his whereabouts on the night Emma Walsh died, what they found in the first few hours of investigation made Sarah's blood run cold. Because Daniel Kruger had a secret that connected him to Emma Walsh in a way no one had ever suspected. And when they finally understood that connection, when they saw the full picture of what had really happened that night in Riverside Park, everything they thought they knew about the case shattered into 1,000 pieces. The conference room at Millbrook Police Department had become a war room. Photographs, documents, and timeline charts covered every available surface. Lieutenant Sarah Mendez stood at the head of the table, surrounded by members of the Keystone Innocence Project, the district attorney, and 2 detectives from the state police cold case unit. The air was thick with tension and the bitter smell of hours-old coffee. On the wall behind Sarah hung 2 photographs. On the left was Marcus Daniel Reed's mugshot from 2003, his face young and terrified. On the right was Daniel Kruger's official police portrait from that same year, his expression calm and confident, the face of a trusted officer. Between them was Emma Walsh's graduation photo, her bright smile frozen in time, a reminder of the life stolen 15 years ago. "Let's go through what we know," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. "The DNA results are definitive. Daniel Kruger's DNA was on Marcus Reed's hoodie. The question is how and why." Jennifer Park, lead attorney for the Keystone Innocence Project, pulled up a file on her laptop. "We've been digging into Kruger's background for the past 72 hours. What we found is disturbing." She clicked a button, and an image appeared on the projection screen. It was a photocopy of an old university enrollment record. Daniel Kruger audited classes at Millbrook University in 2002 and early 2003. Continuing education courses, mostly criminal justice and psychology. He stopped attending in March 2003. 8 months before Emma was killed, Sarah said quietly. "Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting." Jennifer clicked again, bringing up a class roster. Emma Walsh was a teaching assistant for one of those courses. Environmental policy and law. She would have interacted with Kruger multiple times throughout that semester. The district attorney, Thomas Brennan, leaned forward, his face grave. So Kruger knew the victim. That's a connection that was never disclosed during the original investigation. Sarah felt a wave of nausea wash over her. He never mentioned it. Not once. When we were investigating Emma's murder, when we were interviewing everyone who knew her, Kruger was standing right there beside me. He helped us build the suspect list. He never said a word about having taken a class where she was the TA. Detective Raymond Chen from the state police spoke up. "We pulled Kruger's phone records from November 2003. They were archived, but we managed to recover them. In the 3 weeks before Emma's death, Kruger called her cell phone 14 times. Most of the calls were short, under 2 minutes. 2 of them went to voicemail." The room fell silent. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering that night in the park, remembering how Kruger had been the first patrol officer to arrive after the 911 call. She had trusted him completely. They all had. Jennifer pulled up another document. "We also found something in Emma's old email account. Her family gave us access. There's an email thread from October 2003, about 3 weeks before her death." She began to read aloud. It's from Emma to her roommate, Jessica Torres. Quote, "That cop from my class keeps showing up at the library. It's the 3rd time this week. I think he's trying to run into me on purpose. It's getting weird. He keeps asking me to get coffee, and I keep making excuses. I don't want to be rude because he's a police officer, but something about him makes me uncomfortable." End quote. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was horrifying. He was stalking her. "It gets worse," Jennifer continued. "We tracked down Jessica Torres. She's living in Boston now, married with 2 kids. When we told her about the DNA evidence and showed her that email, she broke down. She said she had completely forgotten about it until we brought it up. The trauma of losing Emma, the trial, everything that followed, it had buried that memory. But now she remembers. She said Emma had mentioned that the cop had started showing up at places Emma frequented. The coffee shop near campus. The grocery store. Always claiming it was a coincidence. District Attorney Brennan ran a hand through his graying hair. Why didn't any of this come out during the investigation? Because Kruger controlled the narrative, Sarah said, her voice bitter with self-recrimination. He was a cop. He was one of us. We never thought to look at him. And he made sure we were looking everywhere else. He's the one who found the witness who claimed to see Marcus near the park. He's the one who suggested we search Marcus's apartment. He guided us right to the evidence he had planted. Raymond Chin pulled out another file. We executed a search warrant on Kruger's current residence this morning. He lives alone in a house about 5 miles from here. We found journals, Lieutenant. Dozens of them going back 20 years. This man has been documenting his obsessions with various women for 2 decades. He opened the file and slid several photocopied pages across the table. Sarah forced herself to look at them. The handwriting was neat, almost compulsive. Page after page of observations, schedules, routines. Photographs taped to the margins. And there, in a journal dated September through November 2003, were entries about Emma Walsh. Sarah read one aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. October 17th, 2003. Saw E at the library today. She was wearing that green sweater I like. She smiled at me when I walked past her table, but when I tried to start a conversation, she made an excuse and left. She's playing hard to get. She doesn't understand yet that we're meant to be together. I just need to make her see it. The entry from November 8th, 2003, the day before Emma's murder, was even more chilling. E has been avoiding me. She won't return my calls. Today I saw her talking to that maintenance guy from the university, Marcus something. They were laughing together outside the science building. She never laughs like that with me. I can feel her slipping away. I can't let that happen. Tomorrow I'm going to make things right. Tomorrow she'll understand. Sarah set the page down, her hands shaking. He planned it. He knew exactly what he was going to do. Jennifer nodded. The journals give us motive and premeditation. The DNA gives us physical evidence. And we have more. We found a storage unit Kruger rented under a false name back in 2003. He's been paying for it in cash every month for 15 years. When we opened it this morning, we found a box containing Emma Walsh's missing purse, her phone, and her jewelry. Everything that was taken from her body that night. Trophies, Raymond said. He kept them as trophies. The district attorney stood up, his face flushed with anger. Where is Kruger now? That's the problem, Raymond said. We sent units to his house to bring him in for questioning. He wasn't there. His car is gone. His neighbor said she saw him leaving yesterday afternoon with a suitcase. Sarah felt her heart drop. He knew. Somehow he knew we were coming. Jennifer pulled up another document. We checked his bank records. Yesterday morning, he withdrew $15,000 in cash from his savings account. Then he closed the account entirely. He's running. The room erupted in activity. Sarah grabbed her phone and started making calls, coordinating with state police, putting out a bolo, alerting Border Patrol and airports. But even as she went through the motions, a cold certainty settled in her chest. Daniel Kruger had spent 15 years getting away with murder. He had been a cop. He knew how investigations worked. He knew how to disappear. 3 hours later, they got their first lead. A gas station attendant in Harrisburg, about 90 miles west of Millbrook, reported seeing a man matching Kruger's description filling up a silver Toyota Camry. The timestamp on the security footage showed 9:47 a.m. that morning, nearly 6 hours ago. He had a head start, and he was heading west. Sarah assembled a tactical team and got in her car. As they pulled out of the station, sirens wailing, her phone rang. It was the state police forensics lab. They had been processing evidence from Kruger's house all day, and they had found something else. Something that changed everything again. Lieutenant Mendez, the forensic tech said, his voice tight with urgency. You need to get back here right now. We found another journal in Kruger's bedroom, hidden in a false bottom of his closet. It's recent from this year. And there's an entry from 2 weeks ago that you need to see. What does it say? Sarah asked, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. He's been watching someone else. Another woman. Same pattern as Emma Walsh. Photographs, schedules, obsessive notes. He's been following her for 6 months. And according to his last entry, dated 3 days ago, he was planning to approach her this weekend. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Do we have a name? Yes. Her name is Rachel Kimberly Morrison. She's a 24-year-old graduate student at Millbrook University. We tried calling her 20 minutes ago. Her phone goes straight to voicemail. We sent a unit to her apartment. She's not there. Her roommate said she hasn't seen her since yesterday afternoon. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Sarah pulled the car over to the shoulder, her mind racing. Daniel Kruger wasn't just running from the police. He had taken someone with him. Somewhere out there, a young woman was in the hands of a man who had already killed once and gotten away with it for 15 years. A man who had nothing left to lose. Get her photo out to every law enforcement agency in the region, Sarah barked into the phone. I want every cop in Pennsylvania looking for Rachel Morrison and Daniel Kruger. Amber Alert, Bolo, everything. And get me the GPS data from her phone. If it's turned off, get the last known location before it went dark. She ended the call and sat in her car, her breath coming in short gasps. 15 years. Marcus Reed had spent 15 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Emma Walsh's family had spent 15 years thinking justice had been served. And all that time, Daniel Kruger had been free, watching, waiting, planning to do it again. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Raymond Chun. They had tracked Rachel Morrison's phone. The last ping before it went offline had been at 4:32 p.m. the previous day, from a cell tower near the Pennsylvania-Ohio border, on Interstate 80 westbound. Kruger wasn't just running. He was taking her somewhere specific, somewhere he had planned. Sarah started her car and merged back onto the highway, pushing the accelerator to the floor. Behind her, a convoy of state police vehicles fell into formation. Ahead of her, somewhere in the vast expanse of highways and backroads that stretched across the Midwest, a killer was driving toward an unknown destination with an innocent woman as his captive. And Sarah Mendez knew, with a sickening certainty, that they were in a race against time. Because if they didn't find Rachel Morrison in the next 24 hours, if they didn't stop Daniel Kruger before he reached wherever he was going, history would repeat itself. Another young woman would die. Another family would be shattered. And Sarah would have to live with the knowledge that she had trusted the wrong man 15 years ago, and that trust had cost everything. As the sun began to set over the Pennsylvania hills, casting long shadows across the highway, Sarah's phone rang again. It was Jennifer from the Keystone Project. Her voice was shaking. Sarah, we found something else in the journals. In one of the older ones from 2001, there's a name another woman Kruger was obsessed with. She disappeared that year, and her body was never found. The case went cold. Sarah, I think Emma Walsh wasn't his first victim. I think there are others. The command center at Pennsylvania State Police Headquarters in Harrisburg was a blur of activity. Maps covered the walls, marked with red pins showing Daniel Kruger's last known locations. FBI agents had joined the search after the case was escalated to a federal kidnapping investigation. Sarah Mendez stood at the center of it all, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, her mind running through every possible scenario. It had been 36 hours since Rachel Morrison disappeared. 36 hours since Daniel Kruger had vanished. And with every passing minute, the chances of finding Rachel alive grew slimmer. The tech team had been working around the clock, analyzing cell tower data, traffic cameras, and credit card transactions. They had tracked Kruger's movements west across Pennsylvania, into Ohio, and then north toward the Michigan border. But then the trail went cold. His last confirmed sighting had been at a rest stop outside Toledo, 16 hours ago. After that, nothing. He's switched vehicles, Raymond Chun said, pointing to a traffic camera image on the screen. This is from the rest stop. Kruger pulls in driving the silver Camry at 11:47 p.m. But look at this footage from 20 minutes later. He clicked to another image. The Camry is still there, but Kruger's gone. And see that dark blue van in the corner of the frame? It wasn't there before. We ran the plates. It's registered to a shell company that doesn't exist. Sarah studied the grainy image. In the driver's seat of the van, barely visible, was a figure that matched Kruger's build. He planned this. The van was waiting for him. He's had this escape route ready for years, probably since the day he killed Emma Walsh. Jennifer Park burst into the room, her laptop in hand. "I've got something. We've been going through Kruger's financial records, looking for any properties or assets he might have access to. He doesn't own anything besides his house in Millbrook, but I found something interesting. In 1998, his father, Robert Kruger, purchased a hunting cabin in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Remote location, 30 miles from the nearest town. Robert Kruger died in 2016, and the property went into probate. It was never officially transferred to Daniel, but it was never sold either. It's just been sitting there, abandoned." Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline. That's where he's going. That's where he's taking her. Raymond was already on the phone, coordinating with Michigan State Police. Within minutes, they had a helicopter in the air and tactical teams mobilizing. Sarah grabbed her jacket and headed for the door. "I'm going with them." The flight north took 3 hours. Sarah sat in the helicopter, her stomach churning as they flew over endless stretches of forest. The Upper Peninsula was vast and wild, thousands of square miles of woods and lakes where someone could disappear forever. If Rachel Morrison was in that cabin, if she was still alive, they had one chance to get this right. The sun was setting as they approached the coordinates. The helicopter pilot's voice crackled over the radio. "I've got a structure, 200 yards ahead. Smoke coming from the chimney. And there's a dark vehicle parked in front. Matches the description of the van." Sarah's heart pounded. "Set us down half a mile out. We go in on foot." The tactical team moved through the forest like shadows, their weapons drawn, their night vision goggles turning the darkening woods into shades of green. Sarah followed behind them, every sense on high alert. They could hear the cabin before they could see it, the faint sound of a generator humming in the distance. When they reached the clearing, Sarah signaled for the team to spread out and surround the structure. The cabin was old, its wood weathered and gray, its windows dark except for a faint glow from what looked like a kerosene lamp inside. The blue van was parked out front, its hood still warm. Sarah moved to the front of the team, her weapon drawn, her finger resting on the trigger guard. Through the cabin's front window, she could see movement inside, a figure pacing back and forth. And then, in the corner of the room, she saw her. Rachel Morrison, tied to a chair, her head slumped forward, her dark hair falling across her face. Sarah's blood ran cold. "We're going in. On my count. 3, 2, 1. The door exploded inward as the tactical team breached the cabin. Sarah was right behind them, shouting, "Daniel Kruger, hands up. Police." For a moment, everything froze. Kruger stood in the center of the room, his face illuminated by the flickering lamplight. He looked older than Sarah remembered, his hair grayer, his face lined with years of hidden guilt. But his eyes were the same, cold and calculating. In his right hand, he held a knife. "Stay back," Kruger said, his voice eerily calm. He moved toward Rachel, the knife gleaming in his hand. "You don't understand. None of you understand. She's mine. Just like Emma was mine. They all were." "Put the knife down, Daniel," Sarah said, her weapon trained on his chest. "It's over. We know everything. We know about Emma. We know about the woman who disappeared in 2001. We found your journals. We found the evidence you kept. There's nowhere left to run." Kruger laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "You think this is about running? I stopped running 15 years ago when I watched them send Marcus Reed to prison. That was the moment I realized I was untouchable. A cop investigating a murder he committed. It was perfect, and it would have stayed perfect if you hadn't gone digging into the past." Rachel stirred in the chair, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw the armed officers surrounding her, saw the knife in Kruger's hand, she let out a muffled scream through the gag in her mouth. "Daniel, listen to me," Sarah said, taking a careful step forward. "Rachel has nothing to do with this. She's innocent. Let her go and we can talk." We can figure this out. Figure it out? Kruger's voice rose, becoming frantic. There's nothing to figure out. I loved Emma. I loved her so much it hurt. And she rejected me. She laughed at me. She treated me like I was nothing. So, I made her understand. I made her see that she belonged to me, even if it was only for those last few moments in the park. Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. And what about Marcus Reed? An innocent man who spent 15 years in prison because of you. Doesn't that matter? Kruger shrugged. Collateral damage. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was easy to frame him. A loner with no alibi. All I had to do was put Emma's blood on his hoodie. I processed the evidence myself. No one questioned it. No one questioned me. Rachel was fully conscious now, her eyes wide with terror, tears streaming down her face. Sarah could see her struggling against the ropes binding her to the chair. Let her go, Daniel, Sarah repeated, her voice harder now. This doesn't have to end with another death. You can walk out of here. You can tell your story. People will want to understand. For a moment, something flickered in Kruger's eyes. Doubt, maybe, or regret. But then it was gone, replaced by cold determination. You know I can't do that. The moment I walk out of here in handcuffs, my life is over. Everything I've built, everything I've protected for 15 years, it all falls apart. He moved closer to Rachel, the knife now inches from her throat. The tactical team shifted, ready to take the shot, but Sarah held up her hand. Too risky. If they missed, if Kruger had even a second to react, Rachel would die. You're right, Sarah said, lowering her weapon slightly. Your life as you knew it is over. But Rachel's doesn't have to be. She's 24 years old, Daniel. The same age Emma was. If you ever felt anything real for Emma, if there was any love in what you felt, then prove it now. Don't make another family go through what Emma's family went through. Don't make me watch another young woman die. Kruger stared at Sarah for a long moment. The cabin was silent except for Rachel's muffled breathing and the crackling of the fire in the wood stove. Then, slowly, Kruger lowered the knife. His hand was shaking. I didn't want it to be like this. I just wanted her to understand. I wanted them all to understand. I know, Sarah said softly, though the words burned in her throat. I know, Daniel. But it's time to let her go now. Kruger took a step back from Rachel. The tactical team moved instantly, 2 officers rushing forward to pull Rachel away from him while 2 others tackled Kruger to the ground. The knife clattered across the wooden floor. Within seconds, Kruger was in handcuffs, his face pressed against the cabin floor. Sarah holstered her weapon and moved to Rachel, cutting the ropes binding her wrists and ankles. Rachel collapsed into her arms, sobbing, her whole body shaking. You're safe now, Sarah whispered. You're safe. It's over. As the team led Kruger out of the cabin, he turned back one last time, his eyes finding Sarah's. You were a good cop, Mendez. You still are.
But you trusted me.
You all did. That was your mistake. Sarah watched them load him into the helicopter, and for the first time in 36 hours, she allowed herself to breathe. Rachel Morrison was alive. Daniel Kruger was in custody. And somewhere in a Pennsylvania state prison, Marcus Daniel Reed would finally learn that his 15-year nightmare was over. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood outside the Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution, watching as the gates opened. Marcus Reed walked out into the sunlight, older now, his face marked by the years behind bars, but his eyes clear and bright. The Keystone Innocence Project had secured his immediate release, pending a formal exoneration hearing. The governor had already issued a public apology. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was a start. Marcus saw Sarah standing by her car and walked toward her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus extended his hand. Sarah took it, and then, without thinking, she pulled him into an embrace. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry for what you went through. Marcus pulled back, his eyes wet with tears. You found the truth. That's what matters. You gave me my life back. Daniel Kruger took your life, Sarah said. I just helped return it. The exoneration hearing took place 1 month later. Daniel Kruger, facing charges of murder, kidnapping, evidence tampering, and abuse of authority, pleaded guilty to all counts in exchange for life in prison without parole at a maximum security facility. The plea deals spared Rachel Morrison from having to testify, though she attended the hearing, sitting in the front row, her family beside her. During the hearing, prosecutors revealed the full extent of Kruger's crimes. The woman who had disappeared in 2001, Melissa and Carter, had also been found. Her remains were discovered buried on the property of Kruger's father's cabin, exactly where Kruger had described in a confession he gave in exchange for the plea deal. Melissa had been his first victim, a woman he had become obsessed with while she was working as a paralegal at a law firm he had been assigned to for a security detail. The journals revealed 3 other women Kruger had stalked over the years, though none of those cases had escalated to violence. They had been lucky. Emma Walsh and Melissa Carter had not. Marcus Reed received a $5 million settlement from the state of Pennsylvania for his wrongful conviction. He used part of the money to start a foundation in Emma Walsh's name, dedicated to supporting wrongful conviction cases and providing resources for exonerees trying to rebuild their lives. Sarah Mendez continued working for the Millbrook Police Department, though she transferred to the training division, where she now teaches courses on investigative integrity and the importance of questioning assumptions, even when they point towards seemingly obvious suspects. She visits Marcus once a month, and they have coffee and talk about everything except the case that connected them. Rachel Morrison graduated with her master's degree and became an advocate for victims of stalking, traveling the country to speak about her experience and push for stronger stalking laws. She still has nightmares about that cabin in Michigan, about the knife in Kruger's hand, but she refuses to let those memories define her. On the 15th anniversary of her death, Emma Walsh's family held a memorial service in Riverside Park, at the spot where her body had been found. Marcus Reed attended, along with Sarah Mendez, Rachel Morrison, and hundreds of others whose lives had been touched by Emma's story. They planted a flowering dogwood tree, and on a plaque beneath it were engraved the words Emma had written in her journal just days before she died. The truth always finds a way to the surface, even when buried beneath years of lies. As Sarah stood in that park, watching the sun set over the place where so much tragedy had begun, she thought about all the ways the system had failed. The trust misplaced in a fellow officer. The evidence that had been too convincing to question. The innocent man who had spent 15 years paying for someone else's crime. And the killer who had hidden in plain sight, protected by a badge and the assumptions of those around him. But she also thought about the truth that had finally emerged, about the DNA test that had cracked open a case everyone thought was closed, about the second chance Marcus Reed had been given, and about the young woman who had been saved because they refused to give up. Justice had been delayed, but it had not been denied. And in a world where so many cases remain unsolved, where so many questions go unanswered, that was something worth fighting for. As Sarah walked back to her car, her phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer at the Keystone Innocence Project. They had just taken on a new case, another wrongful conviction that needed investigation. Sarah smiled and typed back a reply. "Send me the details. Let's get to work." Because the truth was still out there, waiting to be found. And for every Daniel Kruger hiding behind a badge, there were people like Sarah Mendez, Marcus Reed, and the Keystone Innocence Project, determined to bring that truth to light, no matter how long it took or how deep they had to dig. The story of Emma Walsh, Marcus Reed, and Daniel Kruger became a landmark case in criminal justice reform, studied in law schools and police academies across the country. It was a reminder that the system, for all its strengths, was only as good as the people who operated it. And that sometimes the most dangerous criminals were the ones we never thought to suspect, the ones who wore uniforms and carried badges and hid their darkness behind a mask of authority. But it was also a story of redemption, of second chances, and of the unbreakable human spirit that refuses to accept injustice, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Marcus Daniel Reed had spent 15 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. But he had walked out of those gates with his head held high, his innocence proven, and his life returned to him. And somewhere, Emma Catherine Walsh could finally rest in peace, knowing that the truth about her death had been revealed and that the man who had stolen her future had finally been brought to justice. The DNA had cleared him after 15 years. And then it revealed who really did it. A cop. A killer. A monster hiding in plain sight. And now, finally, the story was complete.